If you enjoy this video, please remember to subscribe if you haven't already. And if you like what you see on my channel and would like to support me on Patreon, click on the link below. As far back as 1968, Gene Roddenberry was planning to do a film prequel of the original series of Star Trek. This idea for a film prequel would feature Kirk, Spock and Bones at Starfleet Academy, and the script would be in development for well over 40 years. In fact, during the development of Star Trek IV: The Voyage Home, this idea of a prequel film was proposed by producers Harve Bennett and Ralph Winter, and again after the release of Star Trek V, a movie was proposed with a script titled The Academy Years, but the script was rejected. And the final film, Star Trek VI: The Undiscovered Country in 1991, was made. The sixth film would be the final film featuring all of the original crew. There were many more talks and plans for a film prequel to the original series. One idea and story was conceived by the executive producer of Star Trek The Next Generation, Rick Berman. The script was titled Star Trek The Beginning, and the story would revolve around Kirk's ancestor, Tiberius Chase, and would be set after the events of Enterprise. But with the disappointing performance of the fourth Next Generation film, Star Trek Nemesis, in 2002, and the cancellation of the series, Enterprise, the thought of any prequel movie being made was an impossibility. The president of Paramount at that time, Gail Berman, in 2005, convinced CBS, who had ownership over the Star Trek franchise, to allow the studio to produce a film reboot of the series. CBS would give the studio 18 months to develop a Star Trek film. In 1991, before his death, Gene Roddenberry was asked the question, what would become of Star Trek in the future? He replied that he hoped some bright young thing would come along and do it again, bigger and better. Roddenberry's prediction would seem to come true with the release of the 2009 film Star Trek, which was directed by J.J. Abrams, who would make a very costly film reboot that was a prequel, set when Kirk, Spock and Bones first meet at Starfleet Academy. Director Abrams explained he decided to direct the film because after reading the script, he realized he would be so agonizingly envious of whoever stepped in and directed the movie. Abrams felt his basic knowledge of Star Trek made him the perfect choice as the director. The director's company, Bad Robot Productions, produced the film with Paramount. This was actually the first time another company would finance a Star Trek film. Spyglass Entertainment would serve as Bad Robot Productions' financial partner. Writers Roberto Orci and Alex Kurtzman, who were the writers of the Abrams-directed movie Mission Impossible 3, were hired, as well as producers and writers Damon Lindelof and Brian Burke. They felt the franchise explored enough of what took place after the original series. They wanted to explore more of the origins of the characters. Abrams said that he had never seen the last film, Star Trek Nemesis, because he felt the franchise had disconnected from the original series. For him, Star Trek was about Kirk and Spock, and the other series was like a separate space adventure with the name Star Trek. In the creation of the film, the director and the writers were influenced heavily by Star Wars. As far as the pacing of the film, they wanted something more exciting and adventurous than the previous Star Trek films. Their main influences in the writing process was the original series and Star Trek novels. They looked at the novels Prime Directive, Spock's World, and Best Destiny for the backstory of Kirk and Spock. They wanted continuity to the story, but at the same time add something different and new. Abrams wanted Leonard Nimoy to return as an older Spock from another timeline. So a different timeline was added to the story.
You've seen it before, the rules would have been a little bit difficult to kind of make the movie feel brand new. So what we created was sort of this alternate timeline approach that allows our movie to coexist with the original but not be a literal prequel.
They thought that adding time travel to the story would create more jeopardy to the storyline, rather than a way of fixing the timeline. The added timeline, which they would call the Kelvin timeline, was added so they could have the original crew get in a different set of adventures, so they could easily have a new cast to play the beloved characters, and to free the film and the franchise from continuity constraints while preserving the original story. They looked at the Star Trek The Next Generation episode, Yesterday's Enterprise, as an influence. For the villains, they selected the Romulans because Abrams felt the film franchise focused too much on the Klingons as villains and thought they were demonized enough. The writers watched the classic episode, Balance of Terror, the episode that introduces us to the Romulans, for inspiration. Writers Roberto Orci and Alex Kurtzman said they wanted the general audience to like the film as much as the fans. They also wanted to take away what they called Treknobabble and have the simple title of Star Trek to draw in audiences that knew nothing about the movie franchise. Many scenes were cut out of the script, including a scene where Kirk meets Carol Marcus, who in Star Trek II The Wrath of Khan reveals herself to being the mother of his son, David. The character of Carol Marcus was played by actress Alice Eve. In the sequel, Star Trek Into Darkness, many scenes were dropped to introduce the core characters and figure out a way to get the crew together into the film. Casting the film would be a challenge, especially in finding young versions of the older actors.
Casting the movie was key. Never having the actors do impersonations of the original actors, because that would have been a skit, you know what I mean? So we got great actors who were able to come in and make these characters feel familiar and yet completely their own, so that was fun.
For the role of James T. Kirk, they looked at a number of actors, including Joshua Jackson and Chris Pratt. Chris Pine would be the perfect choice to play James T. Kirk. Pine did a lot of research for the part, but stopped because he didn't want to be a straight copy of William Shatner's Kirk, but add his own spin to the role. He incorporated elements of Han Solo, Tom Cruise, and Indiana Jones into the role. Pine even wrote William Shatner a letter asking for his approval, which he got.
There certainly was tribute to be paid to the legacy of Star Trek, to these characters, to what had been brought before by, in my case, Mr. Shatner. So it was a conversation about, taking the scalpel to the performance of Mr. Shatner, finding what things we could kind of use in my performance.
There was a number of actors in mind to play Spock, including actor Adrian Brody, but it was actor Zachary Quinto who was a perfect fit. Quinto truly captured the essence of Spock, as far as his attributes and the physical look went. Of course, we all know that Leonard Nimoy will always be Spock, and no one could ever replace him. But if anyone could come close to playing him, it would have to be Zachary Quinto. To perfect the Vulcan salute, Zachary Quinto would have his fingers glued together to be able to do the Vulcan hand salute perfectly.
I had a bit of a different job, which was to infuse this very well-known creature with my own point of view and to cultivate this internal life that, I wasn't able to express as fully as I would have if I was just a good old human being.
Leonard Nimoy would be cast in the film as the older Spock from a different timeline. He loved the script and later would go on to say he was genuinely excited by the script's scope and its detailing of the characters' backstories, saying, "We have dealt with Spock being half human, half Vulcan, but never the history of the character." New Zealand actor Carl Urban was cast as Dr. Leonard Bones McCoy, and to me truly captures the essence of Dr. Bones McCoy, especially in his mannerisms and partly cantankerous nature. I think in spirit, Urban captures Bones perfectly. John Cho was cast as Hikaru Sulu. Anton Yelchin played Pavel Chekhov and offered a similar yet different version of Chekhov. Zoe Saldana was cast as Uhura, and in the movie would develop a relationship with Spock. This was put in as a nod to the original series where Uhura has an interest in Spock. For the role of Scotty, Simon Pegg did not actually audition for the role. He got an email from J.J. Abrams asking if he would like to play Scotty. Pegg said he would have done the role for free. Abrams wanted the actors to capture the spirit of the original crew, but not be exact in their interpretations, and having the characters in a different reality helped the actors make the role their own. For the part of the main villain, Nero, Australian actor Eric Bana was cast. Actor Russell Crowe was also considered. Eric Bana improvised all of Nero's speech patterns in the film, and his scenes were shot toward the end of filming. Actor Bruce Greenwood was cast as Commander Christopher Pike, a role that was originally played by actor Jeffrey Hunter in the original series Star Trek pilot, The Cage. Majel Barrett, the widow of Gene Roddenberry, reprised her role as the voice of the Enterprise's computer, which she completed 2 weeks before her death. The film is dedicated to Majel Barrett and also dedicated to Gene Roddenberry as a sign of respect to the Star Trek creator. There was talks of William Shatner appearing in the film. A scene was written for Shatner. The scene would feature an old Spock who gives his younger self a message from Kirk from the previous timeline, and it would have transitioned into Shatner reciting Where No Man Has Gone Before, but Shatner, being Shatner, wanted a main role beside Nimoy, even despite Kirk getting killed off in Star Trek Generations. Shatner even made a suggestion that the film canonize his novels where Kirk is resurrected, but J.J. Abrams decided if Kirk was to be in the film, it would become a film about the resurrection of Kirk, and not about introducing new versions of the characters. Production designer Scott Chambliss, who was a longtime collaborator of Abrams, was hired. Chambliss had to remain consistent with the television series, but at the same time had to feel more advanced than real-world technology. The main design of the bridge was vastly different from the original series bridge, and was brighter and more modern-looking, much like the bridge design for the cancelled Phase 2 series. The view screen was more like a window, with images projected onto it. The whole interior of the ship was very sleek, except for engineering, which J.J. Abrams wanted a more industrial look. He was inspired by the 1997 Titanic design. The Romulans in the film were designed to look like pirates, with unique-looking tattoos with disorganized-looking costumes. Filming began on November the 7th of 2007 until March the 27th of 2008. Many locations were used, from Bakersfield, California, from other locations ranging from City Hall in Long Beach, California, to Los Angeles State University of Northridge for the scenes of Starfleet Academy. Iceland was a location suggested for the ice planet Delta Vega, but this was deemed far too expensive. The parking lot at Dodger Stadium was used for the ice planet Delta Vega and the Romulan drilling rig scene on Vulcan. The exterior shots on Vulcan were shot at Vasquez Rocks, the iconic Star Trek location used in many episodes of the original series. The engine room of the USS Enterprise was filmed in a Budweiser factory in Van Nuys, California. The scene where the Starfleet cadets board a shuttle was shot at a Marine Corps hangar in Tucson, California. To make the Star Trek universe more real, Abrams used lens flares, a filmmaking technique that became a J.J. Abrams trademark. There was heavy security on set. Carl Urban remarked, "There is a level of security and secrecy that we have all been forced to adopt. I mean, it's really kind of paranoid and crazy, but sort of justified." Industrial Light and Magic and Digital Domain would handle the special effects. There were over 1,000 special effects shots created, and this was the first Star Trek film where all the ships were fully digital, not models. The design of the Enterprise was intended by Abrams to be a merging of the original series design and the original film design. The sound effects were designed by Star Wars veteran Ben Burt. The phaser blast sounds from the original series were originally derived from the 1953 film The War of the Worlds, but in the movie Ben Burt would make his phaser sounds more like the blasters from Star Wars. The transporter's energizing sound was the same as the one used in the original series of Star Trek. Michael Giacchino, longtime composer for J.J. Abrams, movies and TV shows, scored the film. An impressive score, but nothing to the level of composing legends like Jerry Goldsmith or James Horner, but there are some great little moments in the score. Giacchino admitted personal pressure in scoring the film. He said, "I grew up listening to all of the great Trek music, and that's part of what inspired me to do what I'm doing." Many fans expected this movie to be a prequel to the original Star Trek series, set several years before the events of The Cage and the episode Where No Man Has Gone Before. The film Star Trek in 2009 was a major success, with critics and audiences everywhere, after its release in May of 2009. Setting it in an alternate timeline was a clever way of separating the film from the previous films and series, and it was a great way to introduce new actors in the roles of the beloved characters. And having Leonard Nimoy in the film was a great way to introduce the new actors in their iconic roles to die-hard fans and non-watchers of Star Trek. There are many nice little touches in the film, paying tribute to the original Star Trek series. The scene where a young Spock is being bullied by other Vulcan children reminded me of the animated series episode Yesteryear in 1973, which depicted Spock's childhood in which he was bullied by the Vulcan children. The actors do a wonderful job filling the classic roles. In this film, they really are more over-the-top incarnations of the characters from the original series, especially Simon Pegg's version of Scotty, but this could be forgiven because the film is set in an alternate timeline. The film is much more action-packed than the previous Star Trek films and seems more like a Star Wars-style film. Of course, this was Abrams' intention, and of course he would go on to direct Star Wars: The Force Awakens in 2015. My name's JonBaak. Thanks for watching, and please subscribe if you haven't already.